Attention listeners, ahead are spoilers.
Hello, and welcome to the Movie Trap. My name is Russell Carlson, and with me are my co-hosts and teammates, Chris Boruff.
I want some real food, some real American food. Make me French fries.
And I'm also joined by Zach Powers.
It's a nice spaghetti.
Jesus.
Welcome to the Movie Trap. On the Movie Trap, one of the three hosts you just met picks a theme, and then each of us picks a movie based on that theme, or in this case, more or less an assignment. Once we've watched all three movies, we then vote with an allocated amount of points plus some bonus points, and in this particular theme, there are bonus points. So that's where we are. Once we're done with today, which is right now, we will then use those points to vote on whichever movie we like the best or whatever. And then whichever host movie wins, that host gets to pick the next theme. So, chock full episode today because this theme has been quite weighty as far as us kind of mulling over what the theme is, because it's my theme of make your case theme. Basically, you are going to pick a movie that was nominated for Best Picture and lost, and you are going to make your case to why that is a horrible injustice. So previously I did Fargo over The English Patient, and then last time we did There Will Be Blood and over No Country for Old Men, which was very tight and a very...
That was my pick.
Yeah, that was Zach's pick, and that was a very tight discussion, because this one's worthy. This one's a little different too, because this is Chris Boruff's pick, going back to the hometown for Chris Boruff for Breaking Away, 1979, which lost Best Picture to Kramer versus Kramer. So
There was another nominee that we might talk about later.
Oh, there was. It was actually a pretty not bad year. I mean, you had Being
I agree,
There
yeah.
was up there. I mean, pretty tough year.
Being There nominated, all that jazz was definitely nominated.
Peter Sellers was
yeah.
nominated, but not Being There for Best Picture. But, you know, Norma Ray and all that other stuff, too. So, yeah, that brings us to what the hell Breaking Away was about, because I had never seen it before, never even heard of this fucking movie. So it was an education to me. So I'd be interested to hear making this case once we get down with the rundown. But first, as I mentioned, we have points, and let's just give an audience an update, because we have some bonus points to give out, and whichever one of us hosts agrees with the current pick, they get a bonus point for each host that agrees that they made their case, which we'll deal with that at the end. But as of now, Chris Boruff, you have 2 points for final voting, with 12 points at final voting, I have 1 more bonus point to give out, and 14 points for final voting, and Zach Powers, you have 14 points for final voting with 2 bonus points to give out. So, now that we've gotten all our gears checked and our bicycles oiled, and let's go jump into some limestone quarries there, Zach.
Breaking Away is a 1979 coming-of-age film. It's directed by Peter Yates. It follows a group of teens in Bloomington who are played by Dennis Christopher, Dennis Quaid, Daniel Stern, and Jackie Earle Haley, as well as Barbara Barry as the obligatory love interest. Essentially, the movie follows 4 teens in Bloomington, Indiana. They are 19 years old. They graduated from high school, I should say, about a year ago, and they took most of the year off to just sort of like figure out their lives and loaf around. They spend most of their days at the local quarry, a flooded old quarry, no longer being used, where they swim and jump off the rocks and that sort of thing, and occasionally running out to Indiana University, where they sort of pick little fights with the college boys and hit on the college women. So basically you've got Dave, who is the sort of main character of the 4. He is a cycling enthusiast who wants to be Italian very badly. Then you also have Mike, who's sort of in many regards, the leader of the group, the most assertive in many ways. That's Dennis Quaid. And then there's Cyril, who's mostly just the comic relief. That's Daniel Stern. He's kind of a fuck up, and the comic relief. And then there's Moocher, who is Jackie Earle Haley, the one who is small but kind of gruff. Yeah, so mostly they're spending their time clashing with local college students who call them cutters because their parents were all stone cutters. They laid like ground stones for buildings in the town. Hence the quarry. It's a legacy of like their father's work and that sort of thing. Dave is in particular very into Italian bicycle racing. He in his home life constantly plays Italian albums, speaks in an Italian accent, uses Italian words, renamed the cat Fellini. His dad is at his wit's end. He's sick of his son's weird fascination with bicycling in Italian and shaving his legs. His dad is also a used car salesman who is perhaps a little slimy sometimes in how he does his deals, bringing it back to Fargo maybe in some regards.
Refund! Yeah. Refund!
Yeah. Definitely the kind of guy who would say they put the clear clear coat on at the factory.
True coat, yeah.
The true coat. Anyway, one day while they are sort of antagonizing the local college students, Dave runs across one of the students who drops her booklet. And he follows her for quite a distance and returns it to her, pretending, as he is wont to do, to be Italian upon catching up with her, and assumes the identity of a foreign exchange student named, I think, Enrico? Was that the name?
It's something that didn't sound traditionally Italian when they said it. I was like, really?
Yeah, it was something like Enrico, and her name is Kathy. He calls her Katerina, and he begins to fall head over heels with her. About the same time, he finds that a major Italian bike racing company is coming to their area to participate in a race, which has him over the moon excited. Anyway, he heads back to the sorority house shortly thereafter to serenade Katerina with, of course, some Italian song that I don't know the name of. And Cyril provides accompaniment on guitar. The big bad fraternity guys chase them down. They don't want the townies coming after their women. They catch Cyril and give him a bit of a beating. And so it puts the confrontation between these two groups into a little bit more stark relief. The next time they see each other at a local restaurant / bowling alley, they get into a massive fight that leaves a bunch of windows smashed and people beat up and all this kind of stuff. And the dean of the college says, for you, this might just be a place you're spending a couple of years, but for us and others and those townies, this is our home. And I think I'm going to invite them to come to our big little 500 bicycle race because you guys have been treating them like shit or whatever. Apparently that...
Traditionally how you solve things. Like, oh, they don't like each other? Let's have a sporting event.
That's right.
That dean apparently... that dean played by the real-life university dean at the time, apparently. Eventually Dave manages to get around to the... he's reticent about going to race against the college kids, but he is very pumped to go meet up with the Italians. And he goes to their big event and finds that he is actually able to keep up with them. He, during the race, manages to get alongside them, but finds they are perhaps not as sporting as he had hoped. First, they try to flick a thing on his bike that does something. I don't know bikes, but it makes it bad for biking.
It was the gear. It was his gears. They knocked his gears out.
Oh, okay. So they knocked his gears out, and then when he managed to catch up with them again, they stick a stick in his tires, like that meme, and he sort of crashes off to the side while they laugh. He's disillusioned by this, and decides to go work at his dad's used car sales place. He actually started to do that before the race, I should have said. But he's still practicing regularly, where he is demanding refunds on bad deals that his dad gave out, which causes his dad to have some kind of medical episode. When he says that some people who got a shitty car should get a refund. But now he realizes after his dealings with the Italians that everybody cheats. He's disillusioned. He's, he doesn't see a lot of point in life. He goes to Catherine, tells her the truth about how he's not actually an Italian exchange student. He's just some stupid townie, and she is, reasonably somewhat upset. But his friends nevertheless managed to convince him to participate in the Little 500 against the shitty college boys. And his father, relates stories about when he was a young man and he helped construct this university, and then the university seemed like it was never meant for him later in his life. Like, other people had taken the thing he built and it belonged to them, even though he was the one who laid the stones. So he agrees to go to the race. His dad says he doesn't want to go because he doesn't want to cause him any bad luck. But they head out to the big college race, the big climax. At one point, he injures his ankle and is called off his bike. Several of the pit crew, his 4 friends, jump on the bike in his place, trying to continue the race, but they're not as good as the college kids, even though he had a clear lead on them earlier on. But eventually, he just tapes his feet to the bike and manages to win the big race with his dad, who had been listening on the radio the whole time, arriving near the end of the race to watch his son finally claim victory. A year later, he is attending the University of Indiana. He meets a French girl, Catherine, having gotten a job in Chicago and forgiven him for his falsehoods. But he meets a French girl and seems like he strikes up a potential relationship as himself instead of a fancy Italian guy. And the movie ends with him passing by his dad, who now takes bike rides on campus and can't believe his son got himself a girlfriend. And that's the end of Breaking Away.
I think he was more shocked that he was speaking French instead of Italian.
Yeah, he was like, oh no, this
Whoa?
again?
Yeah, right, yeah.
Here
we go again.
There's a bunch of stuff like that is something... There is something about this one that does come from that time period where there's certain shorthands that when you look at them now, it's like, what is happening? But at the time, it's like, oh, this is like on TV. Like when the dad got so upset and he's like, refund. It's funny, but it's also super cartoonish, and it was super something you would see on TV. It's like no one actually was afraid the father was having a heart attack.
Right, yeah.
Or that the cops sort of showed up.
Refunds. I'm haunted with refunds.
Yeah.
There was a lot of... I was actually... Boruff, you probably would have had a better swing at this if you chose this for the sports theme, big guy.
Probably.
I think because it was a good movie. I mean, it's a strong movie. I mean, I think this is one of I mean, I read that this apparently was 2 different scripts. Basically, there was like the coming of age story with the Cutters versus the college kids, and then there was like this biking story, and then they just kind of combined them two. And that's
for
fine.
me, and I will confess, for me personally, the coming of age Cutters versus college kids part probably resonates more with me. I don't like sports movies. We did 3 sports movies. I don't give a shit about the big race, guys. The big race ain't compelling to me. It isn't. I don't give a fuck if you win the big race.
This one's funny to me just because I remember seeing it when I was a kid. Like this one, I'll be honest, this is a completely subjective pick for me. I don't think I'm going to go for the win here. I just desperately
They're all
wanted.
subjective.
They are, but I thought I would never really have a good opportunity to force you guys to watch Breaking Away after this, which I like Breaking Away a lot, but I like it from Indiana. And the reason that I think it should have won versus Kramer is that
Because you're from Indiana.
Well, but it's also I feel like the stuff it talks about is a little more real than the stuff that was talked about in Kramer versus Kramer. Specifically with the townies, they're called cutters in the movie, but in real life they're referred to as stonies. But when it came out, they had the whole thing where they're like, we don't want people thinking that they're a bunch of potheads out in the woods. We can't call them stonies, so they came up with the name cutters, and that's kind of how they applied it. But
because I'm sure no marijuana use was consumed by anybody from Indiana ever.
Sure.
Especially in counties of that age, you betcha, in the 70s.
Yeah, in the
good,
70s.
clean, wholesome folk. They listen to Merle Haggard and whatnot.
Well, the
Is
weird
it legal there yet? Can they sell marijuana in Indiana? I'm guessing no.
No, they're never going to be able to do that in Indiana. I'd be shocked.
Mike Pence's Indiana? Yeah, I don't think so.
No. The Indiana where it's like if you get 3-2 beer on a Sunday, you'll burn in hell and go to jail. No, thank you. But
go
ahead.
Yeah, no, but I do think, it seemed, based on the way you talked about this, a lot of it was like, it deals with Indiana issues. I just want to address this to Russell real quick. Russell, what's your experience with Indiana?
I've been to Indianapolis once.
Okay, I drove through.
I drove
through part of Indiana to go further up the lake to a town in the next state over one time.
I think
I've spent about 2 hours there.
I think we passed through it on our way back from New York, moving back to Colorado.
Are you guys suggesting?
I visited. Well, I'm just saying. There's not a lot. I've met a lot of people from Indiana.
I guess I live in Chicago, so one thing about Indiana that I know is that most of the guns that are used in the crimes here come from Indiana. Yeah. So that's something I know about Indiana.
Well, Indiana, like when you don't live there, there's a lot of rind on that orange. You just kind of are like, oh, okay, well, that's the thing I go through to get to something else. The thing is having grown up there, some of the issues were really strange, but it's odd to see the racism that pops up in this movie. I don't know if you guys picked up on it. The dad keeps referring to things as ID food. Do you guys know what that means?
I'm not familiar with that term. I'm
I'm pretty sure it's I-tie. Isn't that the old slang towards Italian?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. It is. It's slang towards Italian.
Okay.
So the deal with it. Yeah. Well, the deal is it's weird in Indiana because they didn't have a very large black population, but it was the home of the KKK for a while. It was like one of the two areas that had the most people there. And if you go into Indiana University, there is a mural that the WPA painted of Indiana involving Indiana things. So they had like vaccinations, they had corn, they had a cross with a bunch of people with hoods on burning it, they had kids in a hospital, and it was just part of it was paid for with tax dollars. It's just on the wall. They haven't taken it down. They've had it pointed out. They haven't taken it down, and they refuse to take it down. So the reason I bring this up is that the core issue that they brought up in Indiana, more than race or anything else, was you had to be aware of the papists, and you had to be afraid of the papists. So there was this weird sense of it for a long time that people wouldn't eat Italian food. And I even remember this from like when I was a kid. My grandfather had issues with this. My family had issues with this. And like any sort of food that was not like quote unquote American food or French fries would just
I assume pizza's okay.
Yeah.
I assume I feel like there was a joke in here about somebody becoming a Catholic at a certain point. Don't become Catholic on us.
He did the sign of the cross. His mom said that. That's right. That's right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's don't go playing with the papist kids. That used to be one of the things they would tell people. Yeah. For me, that was something that popped in. I was like, oh, they're just boldly being racist in this movie. They're just letting it happen. But they also handle it as like a stumbling point for that generation. Like the kid is super obsessed with Italian stuff, but his dad is super
I will
against
say,
it.
in terms of, well, I got a couple things to say about that. One, in terms of Italian stuff and the way Italians are representative, every time I see, like, I think it's one of the ones that I feel kind of okay with. Like, every time I see it, I think of the thing that always goes around, that meme of, I think it's Silvio from The Sopranos going, it's anti-Italian discrimination and or Columbus Day. And it's like, all right, it's fine. Like, if your thing is Columbus Day, fuck it. It's fine. But the other thing is, beyond the whatever cultural issues with him liking Italian culture, holy shit, that would be an annoying person to live with. It was awful. I did not like the character at all. Seemed like the worst, most annoying person.
Yeah. You're referring to the main character.
Yeah, Dave at home and his fucking booming Italian music and constantly talking in an Italian accent with Italian words. Like, holy shit.
Yeah.
I would keep reminding him he should go practice his bike riding. Go. Just drive very far away.
His mom was very accepting of that idiosyncratic like weirdness with him. I would not have been. I would have been like, you're not Italian. Stop it.
Well, in a way, it's sort of in a way it's sort of mimicking the whole coming of age story altogether. Because I mean, there's the alpha of the Cutters is Dennis Quaid, and you could tell he like peaked in high school and everything, and now he's just sort of like a dead end burnout townie or whatever. But they're all kind of that's his coping mechanism, is to find a like kind of escape himself and kind of reinvent an identity for himself as a way of getting out of, Bloomington, Indiana or whatever. Whereas, I think his name is Mike, Dennis Quaid's character. He copes with it by trying to not necessarily relive the glory days, but to try to throw his weight around, which he still thinks is substantial, and especially against these, kind of interloping college kids. So in a way, as a character, I get it for a writing perspective, but as a practical roommate situation, I'd apply elsewhere, big guy. Yeah, go. Go.
Yeah, I would be making that kid get his own house. I'd be like, all right, great. Right. Well, you're 18. You got to leave.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
One other quick note. Robin Douglas was the romantic lead in this, I think.
Barbara Barry was the mom.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
Though I would have loved this movie. She
was nominated, too.
My mistake.
I would have loved this movie so much more if there had been like a sexy B plot with Barbara Barry somehow in this, and just like went off in
she really doesn't do. The mom
direction.
Is just kind of like vaguely supportive.
Yeah, they're very much.
The dad is like there's a whole
TV
relationship
parents.
with the dad. The mom is just kind of around.
Yeah. Also, it has PJ Souls in it. I just realized that. Anyway.
Is PJ Souls Halloween's PJ Souls?
Yeah. She plays Susie. I just looked over there and was like, oh, that is also someone who was in this.
Oh, other person I should mention, I found this out when the credits rolled. I told my co-hosts about this, but the main college asshole kid is Hart Bochner, who you might know as Ellis from Die Hard, the Hans Booby, that guy. Is the main college asshole in this. It doesn't even look like him. He looks so much younger. He doesn't have the beard, so that could be a factor.
They all look like babies.
He does look a lot younger.
It
they
took
all
me a
look
long...
like babies. I mean, Daniel Stern, kind of shocked me of how, young and not... I was actually impressed with Daniel Stern in this one. I mean, I know he was there for comic relief, more or less, but he didn't play into the joke as much as I would sort of expect Daniel Stern to, because that's what I've been exposed to of Daniel Stern most of my life. So I was impressed with that. And Dennis Quaid,
he's good. He could be. Stern, like, he was on A.D. Bryant's show Shrill, I believe, and he's pretty good in that. Like, that's a comedy show that has, like, as all comedies now are required to be, like, dramedies, that's a dramedy.
Sure.
And he's good.
I always liked Daniel Stern in Chud. That was the one that always got me, because he also co-wrote it.
That's great. But then, because I think Dennis Quaid. I mean, because I think this is before Randy broke out with Nashville or whatever, right? Or whatever that Bogdanovich film was.
No, Dennis Quaid was famous, I believe, first, because he was in this, then he was in The Right Stuff, The Big Easy,
Yeah, I think that would make
Space.
sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I think the Bogdanovich film is well before Right Stuff.
Probably, maybe, yeah.
But I don't remember. But I gotta say, Dennis Quaid back in the day, kind of a snack. Kind of a good-looking dude.
Yeah, it was funny. There's a reason I really was like cool with him being in Inner Space, and like I followed him for a long time when I was a kid because he was like, oh yeah, he's almost like a leading man, like not a Mel Gibson, but like a who was the other guy who was really famous at the time for action and stuff?
Well, I mean,
Any of them.
Redford,
something like that.
Yeah.
But I always connected him with Indiana, so whenever I saw him and stuff, I was like, oh yeah, he was from Indiana in that movie.
And then rounding out the group, you got, this must be, I assume this is a post Bad News Bears Jackie Earle Haley.
Must be.
I assume that was before this. He definitely looks the youngest of the group. Obviously, years before he played Rorschach/Freddy Krueger.
The child rapist from Little Children.
When he had long hair, very long hair.
Yeah, and he's kind of like Defoe in that way, where he's got a very unique face. Like it's kind of indefinable. Like it's kind of funny looking. Just in a general way.
He's not as good an actor as Defoe or Steve Buscemi, in my opinion.
No,
but,
I concur with that. I absolutely concur with that. I mean, Defoe's amazing. Boy, we've got a wash of good actors here. That's why. Boruff, I guess, like, is it just because it was Indiana? Or, I mean, I know you didn't have an affinity for bike racing because we did the Icarus movie, and none of us really know shit about biking. So was it really just like, did you relate to this? Because I remember back in the film Concussion days when we watched All the Real Girls, right? And you kind of bristled at that movie because it reminded you too much of Indiana. It reminded you too much of the hometown and like these kind of loser burnouts. And you're just like, I hated these guys in high school. I hate them now. So like, these are the kind of guys you're kind of talking about, right?
I might have changed over time.
Okay.
Like, I think it might be how people were portrayed. Like, I definitely was more like the kid who kind of tried and went off to college and stuff like that. But I definitely knew people like the other dudes in this. I think the difference might be that in All the Real Girls, like, this movie doesn't show the dudes, like, carousing and, like, chasing ladies as much. Like, the one guy does chase ladies. There's two guys who chase ladies, but the thing is that they're not, like... My memory of All the Real Girls is there was a little bit more of a predatory nature in terms of how that guy was approaching women. I'm probably misremembering that film, but I really
Me too.
did like. I really did like bicycle racing at the time, though. When I was a kid and I watched this, like I had a bike, and it was like a thing where I was like, "Wow, people are getting famous doing bicycle racing. I'm going to do the little 500 when I get older," and then I never did.
There's a little, I do like, there's a little fun sequence, I didn't mention it in my plot summary because it's not plot important, where Dave goes out to, I don't know, I guess maybe the university is 50 miles away, I'm not entirely sure. He goes out on the highway for reasons, and he follows, like, the big van from the Italian biking company, and, like, drafts behind it, and like manages to get up to like 60 miles per hour, and he and like the van driver have like this friendly thing where like he keeps checking out the mirror to see if he's there, and eventually he gets pulled over by the cops, the driver, because he's speeding because the kid is going so fast behind him. And that's a nice little fun not sequence with like no dialogue. One of the better sequences in the movie, in my opinion.
I really appreciated the turn the dad made, too. I thought that was inappropriate for the climax, too. I mean, it seemed a little shoehorned that he gets right there, right at the end, but I don't care. And at least the end race was climactic enough and they did a good job keeping that at one shot to kind of build the tension. Is he gonna make it? Is he not gonna make it? Like that was pretty well done. There's a lot to like in this movie. I mean, I don't know if I'd go so far to say Best Picture, especially against the competition.
It's
but,
good. And we can eventually start talking about the competition.
We can jump into
yeah.
I'll just briefly throw two things out, and then let's talk about the competition. The Little 500 race was based off a real race that happened. So that was one thing. Like, watching this as a kid, someone was like, this actually happened. And I was like, wow, really? Somebody from Indiana rode in a bike race? And for some reason, I was super impressed by that as a child.
And Hollywood cares.
And also, like, the fact that a lot of those locations were very well-known Bloomington locations. Like, for you guys, it's just like, what is this place? But for me, it was like, oh, that's the greenhouse that I always drive past, or yada yada yada, or that's like the big quarry. So
yeah,
that
the quarry was really cool looking. I liked like the angled rocks. It's a very cool, interesting little quarry. I mean, like, obviously, I'll say this, like, you know, this idea that their fathers were all like, oh, we were all stone cutters. We all worked at the quarry and laid the stones for the university. And now these kids are at the abandoned quarry, and like the college kids are moving in, and it's like, this is our legacy. And it's like, yeah, it works. It's also like very much like, I get it. Like, this is very basic by the numbers, like, for this kind of thing.
Yeah, it was also the way they could talk about the culture difference and probably the income gap of like students coming in versus people who lived in the nearby area, and that's still very common. You go into Bloomington, you go into Indianapolis, a lot of liberal sort of sentimentality, or sentiment I should say, and then as soon as you get outside of that, very red, very poor. That's kind of what happens.
Yeah, I was about to say, I imagine that discrepancy is probably far worse these days, but like, I think that part of the reason why I think this film is kind of maintains its charm is because of it feels authentic. Like, I believed that you know, these townies were actually these townies, and the fact that they actually shot it on location, University of Indiana and whatever, it lent a lot to it, and I think that maintains its charm. I think it helps too that it
definitely works, and it is an enjoyable movie.
Yeah, and I think that it part of the reason having that bike race, I think, is to sort of more or less manufacture a climax, you know, kind of give them something to actually do rather than just like a brawling fist fight between the cutters and the college students. So in a way, I get it. So like, it's sort of like the bike racing is almost secondary, but it's the main thrust of the main character. So it's kind of wants to have it both ways, really, because there's random side stories. I mean, like, Jackie Earle Haley's side story seems to be that he's short. That seems to be his character defining.
He gets angry when people say he's short.
Yeah, that seems to be his.
And he's also like sort of involved with a local girl, and then like he is and isn't, like, depending on the scene, they're dating, or he's like, I ain't seeing her anymore.
Right.
You know, that sort of thing.
Yeah. And then, you know, Mike's kind of got a conflict because, like, his brother, I think, is like a cop. And he's got that kind of dynamic, but there is nothing with Daniel Stern other than just sit there.
Daniel Stern's just a fuck up, like a goofy little fuck up. Mike is like kind of this guy who knows that his glory day, like, he seems like he's confronting the fact that, like, this is it, like, his glory days are done,
right? And
he has to start some shitty job that he'll probably have for the next 40 years.
He's living out the John Cougar Mellencamp song is what he's doing.
Yeah, pretty much.
The writer actually like wrote this based off his college years too. That was one other thing.
See, and I believe that too. That makes sense, because this guy, you know, they tried to spin it off into a TV show apparently.
Which they then shot in Georgia for some reason.
Right. Yeah. Well, you know, the budgeting, and I'm sure. But yeah, and it's kind of the beginning of that, right? Like, we had MASH kind of come out like around that, so you see these movies kind of spin up, and you don't see it now you see it all the time. It seems like we're either rebooting something old, like the Equalizer, you know, Magnum PI or something, or we're taking a pretty successful film franchise and turning it into a TV show. And that seems to be continuing to this day. So I was surprised that this movie was that, because it did win Best Original Screenplay. which I felt was fair because, like I said, like it's a fine screenplay. I mean, I'm sure that Robert Mckee would probably dispute on what's the better screenplay between Kramer versus Kramer and Breaking Away, but because if you haven't read Robert McKee's book, he talks about Kramer versus Kramer a lot, a whole lot.
Well, yeah. So we should talk about. Since this is the nature of this topic, the noble competition.
Indeed.
And in fact, we'll start with the movie that won this particular year. I think all three of us watch this?
Yes, I did watch Kramer versus Kramer again.
Okay. I watched it too, obviously. Kramer versus Kramer won this year. Dustin Hoffman, Meryl Streep, very briefly. It is the story of one day Dustin Hoffman comes home. His wife, Meryl Streep, wants a divorce, seemingly out of the blue, but it turns out he's been somewhat neglectful. Over the course of the next 15 months, he has to take care of his son by himself. Initially, he's incompetent, and it causes difficulties in his career and personal life, but eventually he becomes better at it. She returns, decides that, she attempts to gain custody of the kid after she returns back from California. There is a court battle, and eventually, though she wins the court battle, she decides that actually she feels that the child is already home with Dustin Hoffman at the apartment where he has been growing up all this time. Kramer vs. Kramer won the Best Picture Oscar in the 1980 Academy Awards. Breaking Away.
Both Dustin and Meryl got their respective Oscars.
Yes.
I think it did win Best.
Meryl in it a lot less than I expected when I went in.
What? Because I remember the closest contemporary I've seen to Kramer versus Kramer is that Marriage Story movie with Adam Driver and Scarlett Johansson. I felt that one was a lot more balanced. Because I felt like Kramer versus Kramer
I think that's a better,
almost exclusively
this is Dustin
Hoffman's perspective, which is fine. I mean, it's a different story, but it didn't really, like I said, less Kramer versus Kramer and more just regular Kramer.
I mean,
really.
It is wild to me that this woman just didn't see her son fully at all for 15 months when he's 5. Holy shit! I mean, to me, that's kind of that's kind of bad.
That's something that bothered me on this one. It almost plays like a men's rights movie. Because, like, the mom, she's just like, I'm just bored being a mom. I don't find this kid interesting. And she leaves in the first scene. And then the rest of the movie is Dustin Hoffman wandering around going, hey, I'm a working dad. What am I supposed to do?
I get the idea, like, that he's over-invested in his work and neglectful of his family. Like, that's fine, but her leaving for that period of time and not seeing the kid straight up at all is fucking wild to me.
Yeah.
And then coming back...
coming back and being like, okay, custody now.
Yeah.
And then going through the whole thing and then being at the very end like, oh, wait, I don't want my kid anymore. You can have him. Take Spaxies. And it's like, what is this movie about, and why is this movie?
Yeah, and I don't think it's that bad. I think it's a
I actually I enjoyed the movie. I think the relationship between Dustin Hoffman and the kid is pretty well done. His evolving agency as a father.
Sure. Yeah. And Dustin Hoffman's behavior on set notwithstanding, probably a good role for him. I mean, I read somewhere that this is almost like the sequel to The Graduate. Like, this is what happens in their marriage, and that's sort of the end point of The Graduate. Maybe not, probably not. But you could appreciate a movie. Both of these movies are relatively simple plot-wise.
They are.
They're both relatively simple plot-wise, so it's a lot of meaty character shit. And that's why Mckee goes on and on about Kramer versus Kramer, because he really enjoyed the fact that the plot is kind of revealed through character, or at least the stakes are revealed through the character, not necessarily through the plot. And I think he's kind of right on that. That being said, considering the other nominees, it's hard. And because the other nominee we're going to talk about, which I didn't get a chance to rewatch because I didn't get a chance to, but and I haven't seen it since college, is Apocalypse Now. That one's different, right? I mean, that one, out of all those nominees, that one stands out like a sore thumb, right? Like, every other movie is like kind of simple human little drama.
Yeah, I mean, like all that. I didn't get around to all that jazz, which I was kind of interested in. That's a Bob Fosse musical. Like, those are,
Isn't it
pretty big productions, but I think kind of. It's about somebody like making a musical. And Fosse's like, he's famous, like Chicago and a bunch of others. Like he's one of the most famous musical theater people to ever live. Like there was a whole fucking mini series called Fosse Verdon about him, and like he was played by Sam Rockwell. Really good little mini series. His best friend was Patty Chayefsky, who wrote Network, who appears in that little like fictionalized miniseries, is like his friend who he's constantly going to like getaways with and getting drunk, and he's like writing Network while while Fosse is like making Chicago or whatever the fuck.
That was a Ryan Murphy thing, wasn't it? That Fosse Verdon show.
No, I think it was somebody else because it's a lot classier than Ryan Murphy.
All right. That's fair.
It's good. It's good. It's genuinely good.
I mean, Apocalypse Now is probably a better movie than Breaking Away. I'm not going to argue it's not. But
I don't know.
But if we're just saying,
I'm not as in love with Apocalypse Now as other people are. I remember when I watched it in high school, I liked it, but I didn't really understand the big deal about it because it was really long. And then I watched it again in college, the redo. And none of those
everybody hates the redo.
Apprehensions.
Even people, I've never seen the redo. Even people who like Apocalypse Now say the redo sucks.
Well, and even he went back and recut the redo too. Like, there's like a different cut now where he cut out a little bit, but it's still longer than the original.
So, I watched Apocalypse Now again prior for this. I had not seen it in years, probably 10 years, maybe something like that, maybe more. It's I liked it when I first saw it. I still think it's fucking great. Like, it's good. That is a good ass movie. It's maybe like at the time I first saw it, I thought it was my favorite Coppola movie. I think it still might be my favorite Coppola movie. It's really unique and good. It's insane. It feels unique to like almost any other movie I've seen. Obviously, its production is famously wild as fuck. Some of the things they managed to do in that movie are really awesome and unique.
Right, like getting Marlon Brando to show up at all.
Yeah, for sure.
Great
I mean, everybody was on. It is like one of those things that's like a catastrophe, but like everybody was fucked up making this movie, and it kind of works just because of the nature of what this movie is, what it's supposed to be. I don't know, by pure chance, like it's one of those lightning in a bottle, 1 in a million chances kind of things. It really like shouldn't have happened as well as it did, in my opinion, but it did. And I don't know. I think that it is like the best movie about Vietnam ever written. It's an exceptional adaptation of the Joseph Conrad novel, Heart of Darkness, at the same time, which is not about Vietnam. It's about the Congo during the rubber trade.
It ends better, too.
Yeah.
Than the book, I agree.
Yeah.
John Milius co-wrote that, too. Who, my favorite story about John Milius, outside of him being a fucking lunatic, is apparently the Coen brothers based Walter from The Big Lebowski off of John Milius, which that tracks. That sounds about right.
Yeah.
So and Apocalypse Now is such a feat, as Zach was saying. Like I feel like in the mid 70s and now we're in the later 70s, everyone is into like these kind of meaty, character-driven stuff. And a movie like Apocalypse Now, I'm not saying it's not character-driven, but it's not nearly the exploration of a certain character. It's more of an exploration of a certain philosophy and world, really.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Like it's a lot more of a it's a lot harder of a story to tell. It's a lot harder of a story to tell. And it's probably Coppola's best film. I mean, it's not my favorite. My
you
favorite's
don't
always
remember the movie is. There are points where it's fucking funny, like in a Coen Brothers way. There are like genuinely like Kilgore like comes up to that guy who has like his pot lid, like a pot lid over his guts, and he's like, any man who is holding his guts in with a pot lid can drink from my flask anytime, and he just about starts to give it to him, and some guy said, there's a famous surfer over there, and he's like, what? And just pulls away. Like the whole that character is so absurd, and genuinely I would say in like a proto Coen way, like that character is ridiculous and very funny.
Kilgore is very much like that, and he's probably the thing is that's like what 4% of the movie. Like it's not a
longer
big
than I
of the
thought.
movie.
It's like 25 minutes. They really spent a couple days with Kilgore.
It has a lot of texture to it. There's a lot of things that have different asides and different things they can get into. It's very much like a Man on the Road type film. That
vignettes.
Definitely, vignettes. It was definitely embellished on from the novel, because the novel was pretty straightforward. It's like, where is he? He's in there. We're traveling. I think there's one stop off. Traveling. We found him. Yada yada yada. I remember it being funny. I remember it like just being a huge epic scale. Like it's so much larger of a movie than either of these movies.
Yeah.
Like it's crazy to compare them on that.
And that doesn't necessarily make Apocalypse Now the superior movie, I think.
No, there are movies that are much bigger scale that I would say are much worse than either Kramer versus Kramer or Breaking Away.
It's not necessarily that I don't think meaty character dramas can't win out Best Picture in that too. So this is where I'm kind of at a point here where I kind of don't know, because I think that Kramer versus Kramer got a lot of hype because I think a lot of people were dealing with divorce and it was a lot more of a prevalent thing. And I think the culture kind of latched onto that. By the time Apocalypse Now comes out, I think people are kind of over Vietnam. They're kind of tired of hearing about it. So I don't think it's not a movie that was meant for its time. It certainly lasted beyond its time, for sure. I mean, anybody, if you see that movie, you really never forget it. Like you really only need to see it once, but you really will never leave you. Kramer versus Kramer, and even in some respects, Breaking Away, I feel like, these movies are everywhere. Marriage Story, like I said, that was just a little bit ago. Hell, we already did a bike racing movie.
I think I like Marriage Story better than Kramer versus Kramer. I should say I did enjoy Kramer versus Kramer. I did not think Kramer versus Kramer was a bad movie. I thought, I thought there were things that they did really well. Like I said, I thought the main through line of Dustin Hoffman's evolving relationship with this kid was genuinely mostly very strong. The court case, which started much later than I expected, where like these sort of like shitty, devious, like these things, like lawyers using these aspects of their relationship, like things like that, and it's kind of interesting because like both of them like are like mouthing to each other. It's like, it's okay, blah blah blah, like, oh, I didn't know the lawyer was going to do that, which is one thing. I mean, partially it reflects upon this fucking her depth thing that is such a fucking nightmare right now, except like in that case there's much more like the actual people involved, like the plaintiff and defendant themselves are like much more directly involved in particular, in my opinion, one of them.
It's very much like public spectacle that is different. Like this movie,
and it's not like they're secretly supportive of each other or whatever. But go ahead.
Well, I was just wondering, I would just like to say the things that give me pause about Kramer versus Kramer. So the one thing that has always bothered me is that Robert McKee always goes on about the French toast scene.
I don't know who fucking Robert McKee is, guys.
Okay.
I don't know who this man is.
He wrote a book called Story, and it's essentially one of these.
You've seen Brian Cox played him in Adaptation, the Nicolas Cage movie.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you remember the script doctor?
I remember that scene. I remember that scene.
That is Robert McKee. That is what has made him famous. He essentially had an entire career not based off making anything, but instead based off writing a book telling people how to structure a story. And he has all these descriptions and things like that, and it's very much like a Sid Field or one of these other writers where they give you the basic function and form of a story, and it's all... Essentially, when you get back to the beginning of all that stuff, it's all the writer of A Thousand Faces, Joseph Campbell, doing his thing.
Joseph Campbell, yeah.
Yeah. So, anyway, the thing that bothers me about Kramer versus Kramer, a few things, like the fact that in that scene they build it up like he's doing things that don't make sense as a human being, like he puts eggs in the cup, and rather than taking it out like a normal human being, he's like, don't you like your French toast crunchy? It's like, what sort of a person has ever wanted crunchy French toast with eggshells in it? And like the kid starts crying and it gets built up, and it's like, the thing is, and this is the thing that really kind of has always bothered me with Kramer versus Kramer, like, we have to assume that Dustin Hoffman has been at home at some point over the last 5 years or 6 years. He's got to know a little bit about this kid and how this thing sets up. But he's so fish out of water.
Yeah,
it's like Big Daddy.
Mixed.
He's so confused by this child. He doesn't know how to interact with this child.
In the I would say, particularly like a guy who's like the only working person in the house in the 1970s, like, it's not insane to me that you don't fucking know anything at all about making French toast, except like there's eggs or something. Like, actually, that doesn't seem that insane to me for a person in that time who is the only working member of a household who like does fuck all to prepare meals. Like, honestly,
Sure.
I could see it. I could see people like that now, like, who just put shit in the microwave, and like if you ask them to make French toast, they'd be like, fuck, I don't know. Like, and I'd say, you know, it's another thing, like, obviously, like, it's a paired scene, right? It's him making French toast at the beginning, and at the end they do it together, like, efficiently, and it like shows his growth. Is that revelatory? No. Does it work? Yeah. And like, that's the same thing I'd say about almost everything in Breaking Away.
Well, I think the other thing is that he approaches it with such confusion, like he approaches just being a dad in general with like such sort of confusion over how to organize a schedule, and they spend a lot of time on that. And I get that it was probably hard, but like, this movie to me feels like it stood out more because it's an issue movie, not because it's a particularly good film. Like, to me it jumped out more like, I'll just say it, Crash. Crash was about racism.
Okay.
This movie was about divorce. It was about, like, we're having divorces. It was still, in the 1970s, it's 79, it was still sort of taboo. But I remember watching this with my mom, and it was really uncomfortable because I was like, did you and Daddy ever get divorced? She's like, no, we just never got married. And it was like, oh, is there something worse than being divorced? Well, being a bastard's kind of part of that. And then that turned into a whole conversation, and I realized, like, oh, so there's all these weird rules about how families are put together. But, like, this movie also, like, the lawyer scene has always bothered me because they're super unprofessional lawyers. Like, and there's a weirdness with how the judge interacts on a number of these questions. Like, someone's like, have you screwed up the most important relationship in your life? And someone's like, I object to that, which I think is a valid objection. I'll allow it. This is pertinent to her mothering. And then she's like, yes, I did. I was terrible. I was a bad mother wife. And then, you know, all of the interactions hit me as so weird like that. I mean, it's very common that, like, no one knew how to write lawyers properly at the time. but it's still weird.
I think that those are all very valid.
Yeah.
But I'm going to go with this and say, like, I have the same problem. Like, in terms of breaking away, A, how fucking annoying this kid is about being Italian is, like, over the top insane to me. And B, this whole horse shit where he's, like, an Italian exchange student with this woman for 50, 60% of the runtime is as fucking absurd as any of that. Like,
I had a friend who pretended to be a Scottish exchange student for like a good week, and he nearly pulled it off. He only met them for like a week or whatever, but the whole weekend everyone thought he was from Scotland. So I mean that's why I gotta give it a little bit of a pass. It's just kind of young kids being fuckos, you know. So like in a way I kind of get it, but I mean yeah, it'd be annoying, but I don't feel like. I don't feel like Dennis Christopher, I think the actor's name is, his it's not about his inability to connect with other people. He just wants to live in this world. He's just going to live in this fantasy, and he doesn't care who he has to drag around with him. Now, I kind of agree that there's nothing really revelatory about that other than the whole kind of getting trashed. You know, they throw the spiked turtle shell at him during the race, the Italians do, or whatever. So I... at least there's a consequence to that. With at least with Kramer versus Kramer, though, with the French toast scene, as Mckee brings up, you see the evolution of that, right? And it's not really talked about as an evolution. He doesn't say, wow, I'm really learning how to be a father here. It just kind of happens naturally. And that's how the movie, like, you're kind of surprised how that movie messes with time, right? Like, you're 20 minutes in the movie and it's like she's been gone for 8 months. The fuck? Yeah. You know, like it's really kind of messy that way. So
when they said 15 months, I was like, fucking what?
Yeah, right. Yeah. I mean, it's just like you haven't seen her for 8 months. What the fuck? I thought so that the movie doesn't, for being such a simple, the movie doesn't really hold your hand through it. It kind of just, you're right by Dustin Hoffman pretty much the whole movie. So that's the perspective you're going to go with.
That's true.
But at the same time, it's not necessarily, I don't want to say it's necessarily like siding with Dustin Hoffman, but it inevitably does because that's the person you're following most of the time.
He's the central character, clearly.
So that,
and again,
that's kind
like
of
in
my
Marriage
problem
Story, they're both the main character, much more so.
And like Marriage Story too, like they don't really get to the core of the central conflict. Like Marriage Story has that big climactic drag out between the two of them, and it hints at a lot of stuff, but it never says anything explicitly because that's real relationships, really. I mean, like, it's not one thing, it's usually a totality of things, and this movie kind of tries to do that with the lawyering scene. And so I'm kind of with you, Boruff, where I do feel like, you know, like the lawyering scenes at the end did seem, I mean, I don't know if that was supposed to show that, like, were it not for divorce proceedings, maybe people wouldn't hate each other during divorce. I don't know. But I kind of also am with Zach here that I don't think the points in Breaking Away were that much better.
Let me put it this way real quick, right? Like, I think that there are better versions of Kramer versus Kramer now. Marriage Story is probably the most easily recognizable one.
Recency bias, but yeah.
And there are better versions of Breaking Away, like the sports movie, like both before and after there are better versions, and the coming of age movie, there are better versions both before and after.
And I'd say there's better versions that marry the two, you know, that like have the two,
Yeah.
like Friday Night Lights, in my opinion, like I think it
Yeah,
shows that kind of small town trapped concept that all these kids feel, but yet you have this, the most important thing in your life is this fucking bike race, you know. And,
For sure.
And Friday Night Lights, I think, or you could even go to Varsity Blues if you'd like. But I sort of will go Friday Night Lights. So yeah, I agree.
But here's the dirty little secret. Ain't no better version of Apocalypse Now. It's still Apocalypse Now is still singular.
Yeah. Yeah, even you know, the closest comparison you can come up with is probably Full Metal Jacket, right? Like that's probably the closest.
And it's very
they get.
different.
And they're different movies because they're telling different stories, basically. You know, Full Metal Jacket's about the, you know, crossing that line, whereas Apocalypse Now is dealing with a lot more, you know, heady stuff. You know, saying a lot without saying a lot. Coppola's. and he shot the fuck out of it. You gotta give him that. He
It's
shot
beautiful.
the hell out of it.
It looks great.
Well, I mean, and that's the only Oscar it won too, was his cinematographer, which wasn't Gordon Willis. I always thought it was Gordon Willis, but it wasn't.
Who was the cinematographer on it? Was it
Vittorio
Victoria Storaro?
I think that's him. Yeah, he won the Oscar for it too. And Murch won. Let's never forget Walter Murch. Once again, he shows up again.
I mean, you guys talked me into it. I think that Apocalypse Now should have won over Kramer versus Kramer. I just didn't pick that movie. I picked the other movie. I picked Breaking Away.
And on my dice roll was literally Apocalypse Now beating Kramer versus Kramer. One of my 6 options was this, and when you said last episode, like, in 1979, I was like, oh, he's going with Apocalypse Now, and then you said Breaking Away. I was like, what the fuck?
I understand why you picked
the unusual pick. I often dig a little deeper into the odd ones, but
I'll say, because you had an opportunity at bat with this movie, sir, and you chose Cool Runnings. Okay, so you have no one to blame but yourself.
I'm going to say. Neither of you guys watched Apocalypse Now, so if the show goes on, I'm gonna keep that in my sleeve. I think that's not an entirely burned bridge, because if you guys haven't seen it since college, that's a long fucking time.
Yeah, and I am overdue. And one of these days, I always threatened Sarah, my wife, to watch it, because she's at least seen 2001. So I figured if she can get through that, she could probably get through Apocalypse Now.
Yeah. I mean, Apocalypse Now has interesting stuff. It's good. It's just that it's long. It's just so long.
Yep. And kind of boring. That was my takeaway.
Well, the last time you saw it was the redo.
Yeah, that boy howdy.
Apparently, has an hour-long scene at a French plantation.
It's like
that's
20
supposed to be
minutes.
Fucking god awful.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's long. There's a lot. Oh God.
I don't know. I mean, I'm gonna be the apologist and say, like, man, I watched this movie again, first time in 10, 12, 13, 14 years, and I was like, I really enjoyed it. Still.
Have you ever seen the making of documentary?
I have indeed.
Yeah. Okay.
I've never seen the redux, or redo, wherever you want to say it. I've never seen that shit. I don't intend to see that.
Sure.
I'd probably be. But
I have seen Heart of
Darkness.
Yeah. I'd be down to see the regular length version. The long one, I've seen redo once. It felt very much like someone took all the deleted scenes on a DVD and just cut them back into the movie.
I've heard it's awful. I have no interest.
Yeah. Well, and because, I mean, once Coppola had to put his own money into it because it was such a runaway production, he knew he had to have some semblance of commercial success, so
and
he knew he couldn't have this,
did you know
tome of movie that
Hearts of Darkness, the documentary about the making of, which is a great documentary and much shorter than the film itself. I think it's about 90 minutes. Was directed by the departed, the late brother of Colorado Senator John Hickenlooper.
I did not know that. That's wild. That's crazy.
He's passed away since making it, but
okay.
I believe his brother made that documentary.
That's one of the definitive like movie making documentaries. I'll tell people if they want to get into this business. Watch that.
To be fair, like the original, a lot of the original footage was filmed by Coppola's wife because obviously it's from the actual production. But the person who put together the documentary and made the additional footage later on was Hickenlooper's brother.
Yeah, definitely. I recommend the documentary, even if you haven't seen the movie. I think that, like, again, it's a really it's a blood curdling tale of making movies. Because insane. Well, how do we want to? Do we want to do like final thoughts on Breaking Away, and then go into who we thought should have won? So. Yeah, I guess so. Okay,
we can do that.
Okay, well, I guess I'll go into my final thoughts since this was my insane theme. Thank you guys for being sports about it, because this was definitely there was a lot.
I actually enjoyed. I was a little more homework, but I really enjoyed. Watching some of these extra movies, and for the most part, they were all quite good movies.
Sure.
Like, I enjoyed nearly all of them.
Mm-hmm.
The English Patient was probably the hardest slog.
Yeah, probably true. Yeah, that movie. Anyway, I think the less I say about Fargo, the better. I think. I think that. So for Breaking Away, it's a solid script. You know, it's a really good story where the characters are not. I mean, they're real people, you know, and it kind of tries to shine onto that, but because a lot of the main characters' hangups are stuff that you don't really deal with, it kind of feels just more melodrama-y to me. It seems like we could have had a little bit more interactions and conflicts in between the two. Like, they feel like they kept touching at that. Like, everybody's kind of bristling at Mike, kind of like saying, you know, you guys are fucking losers. I only hang out with you because, like, anyway. And none of that ever gets resolved. Like, and it's all resolved through the bike race, right? It's all kind of comes together in the bike race. So in a way, I kind of admire that, you know, but also in a way, it is kind of like an easy way to throw in a climax. So interesting movie, you know. Like I said, I was impressed with a young Daniel Stern and even Dennis Quaid, and it, you know, it's generally it's an earnest movie, which you like, you know. And even at the end of the climax, I was kind of like, oh, Dad's like, he's sitting there, he doesn't want to be a bad luck. Then he's listening on the radio. He says, you know what, hell with this, I'm going. You know, that was a nice moment. I thought that was a nice payoff for. But the problem is none of the main characters themselves grow. It's the dad who shows the most character growth. And even that, he reverts right back into, bonjour, what? Anyway, in contrast to Kramer versus Kramer, I think that Kramer versus Kramer is more of its time than it should be. I think that's why I think both these movies are kind of about that. They're kind of like, you know, the 70s are kind of winding down. We're getting into the 80s, and everybody's kind of, you know, there's like economics aren't really all that great. So there's a lot of reflection, I think, that the audience maybe felt with these two movies at the time. So I think that Breaking Away it's a good movie. It's a good sports movie. I just don't know if I would put it in Best Picture, but I can't say I would say the same thing about Kramer versus Kramer too. So. I guess, Zach, why don't you give your final thoughts, and then we'll have Chris make his final plea.
Okay. So Breaking Away, it's an enjoyable movie. I don't think it's going to, like, stick with me for a particularly long period of time. Like, it does what it sets out to do okay. Earlier somebody mentioned that it was apparently two scripts that were kind of like meshed together. Mm-hmm. And that makes sense, actually. Like, I didn't know that at the time I saw it. I didn't know that until you said it. It does feel like there's two tones, two stories, two things going on. I like the coming of age thing more. I like the dad's, like, the relationship with the father and the son is, like, in my opinion, the much stronger aspect of the story. All the shit with the girlfriend, the friends are okay. Mm-hmm. The dad stuff is pretty strong, like, the legacy of, like, whatever, you were, you built this town and the town has outgrown you. Like, that's the stuff that's more interesting. And then there's also, like, whatever, the kid's fucking obsessed with Italians or whatever. I don't give a shit. Like, it's okay. If we're just jumping in with what we think of the other nominees for this year, because Russell kind of did during our final thoughts. No, actually, I'm going to save it because this is going to be where we award Chris bonus points or don't.
Okay. There we go. All right, Chris. So why don't you give us your final thoughts on Breaking Away and make your closing argument, so to speak?
Well, the reason that I've always remembered this film is that I believe it might actually be one of the first sports films that I ever saw as a kid. Legitimately, it would have been a better pick for the sports theme, but I went with a choice. I went with a choice that was suggested to me. But do I think that it is better than Apocalypse Now? No. Do I think it's better than the other ones? No. However, for me, it is always Married to the Time. It's something that when I watch this movie, I feel very warm about it myself. I think that it did get into some of the cultural issues at the time, not particularly in a deeper fashion than Kramer versus Kramer, but to me, for whatever reason, Kramer versus Kramer felt more not sentimental, but it felt like it had a degree of melodrama there and a lot of stuff that was brought to the film by the audience. So like someone going through a divorce would come and see that film and it would resonate with them more. I think watching it now, I don't know if I had as deep a response to it. And the only other thing I'd like to say is that I like Peter Yates's directing. I like him in general as a director. He did Bullet, and that one had some really incredible editing sequences in it. He also made one that I don't think anybody else likes, but I have always liked because I'm a goofy child of the 80s, Krull. He directed Krull like 2 years later. So if you can imagine someone going from this heartfelt, small Indiana story to suddenly directing Krull, it might be an interesting way to look at how that guy's commercial career went topsy-turvy wild after this for a little bit. And then I think he eventually just started doing TV, and he was probably a little bit having an easier time of it at that point.
Sure. Shorter days, not away from home as much.
Actually, let me double check something. Is Peter Yates related to David Yates?
I don't know. I don't think so. Sure. I think David Yates is English.
Is David Yates a nepotism baby? That's my question. I don't think he is. Yeah. I feel like he's not.
Yeah, I don't think so, because I think...
I'm looking it up. I don't see anything about David Yates on here. Yeah, nope. Seems unrelated. Just checking.
Okay. So, Boruff...
now it's time for us to each in turn say whether this is disqualified.
Oh, man. I mean...
Do you want me to go first?
Yeah, you go first, because I think I know what you're going to say.
Not only do I like Apocalypse Now better than this, I liked Kramer versus Kramer better than Breaking Away. I'm sorry. No, this should not have won Best Picture that year. There's a good chance I would have liked All That Jazz better, but I didn't watch it.
I have to be honest with myself, Boruff. I gotta go with Zach on this one. It's not like I loved Kramer versus Kramer, but I mean, I hadn't even heard of Breaking Away. So if I'm being consistent with my metric that I've done for the past 2 episodes, which is, cultural relevance and longevity, I don't think there's much in Breaking Away, and there's still some things of Kramer. Mckee spent a good chunk of his book about Kramer versus Kramer. I don't think too many people are talking or remember Breaking Away, because I had never even heard of it until you mentioned it. So I'm afraid I gotta go with Zach on this one, buddy. I'm sorry. I think Kramer versus Kramer was a better movie.
I probably had warm, rosy-colored glasses thinking about this film in my past, so that was probably what I brought to it.
I completely understand.
Of course, that happens all the time.
You're charmed and romantic.
Yeah, that is
totally
perfectly valid. I think I would hope that over the course of the show, each of us brings a film that is derided by our co-host because we like it too much, because that is not a failing of a person. That is actually an asset. Like, if you don't have a movie that you love and everybody else is like, that movie fucking sucks, then you don't have any personality. And Breaking Away doesn't suck.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it was a good movie. I mean, even if I don't factor in Apocalypse Now, I think I'd still probably give it to Kramer versus Kramer. I mean, say what you will about Dustin Hoffman.
This was at best third.
They are on fire in that movie. I mean, both of them are on.
It's true. They're just going. And it's also, Indiana isn't exactly the most inspiring location. There's a reason that the movie with all the kids that's on Netflix that everyone likes, with the
Stranger
Things. The movie on Netflix that all the kids like, Stranger Things. There's a reason that it's set in Indiana, but they had to include a lot of shit that has nothing to do with Indiana. It's like spooky ooky monsters from outer space or
Hey,
wherever.
you got Stranger Things. You got Parks and Recreation. That's Indiana.
They involved
So, there
comedy.
you go.
That doesn't happen in Indiana.
It's too funny. No. Okay, well, unfortunately, Breaking Away is disqualified.
To
from
clarify, we have discussed what would happen in the case of a DQ. This is our first
true.
DQ on the show.
Mm-hmm.
We are going to vote with our allocated points as if the disqualified movie wasn't disqualified. If it gets the top spot, the one with the second most votes becomes the winner. That is essentially how we're going to play this.
So we're gonna vote like we normally would, but if Breaking Away wins, then it goes to the second place. So, before we get into that, let's talk about our points. Boruff, you stuck around with 12. We didn't give out any bonus points this episode. Well done, everybody. So you know what, Boruff? I'm
Not
gonna give you a
inspired.
bonus point
No,
because I'm gonna give you a bonus point.
No pity bonus
You don't want my
points.
charity, huh?
No,
All right.
no crying in baseball.
Okay, you got it. Or in Italian bicycle racing. Okay, so Boruff, you have 12 points. I have 14 points for final voting, and Zach, you have 14 points for final voting as well. Okay, so I guess with that in mind, let's get to the voting.
Okay, goodness. All right.
All right, Boruff, for Fargo, what do you got?
Giving Fargo a 5 because I
Okay.
think it should have
Nice,
won.
the wood
I
chipper.
agree. Yep.
Nice wood chipper for our audio listeners. There you go.
Yep.
I gave Fargo a 7.
I gave Fargo a 6.
Okay. 18 points for Fargo. So,
Pretty good.
There Will Be Blood. Yeah, 5, 7, and 6. Okay. So, Boruff, what do you got for There Will Be Blood?
I gave There Will Be Blood a 4 and did about as good as I could of some drinking a milkshake.
With a long straw. Well done. Okay. I gave There Will Be Blood a 6.
I also gave There Will Be Blood a 6.
Okay. So that's 14. So Fargo to beat. No.
Dang,
18. We are tied.
Oh, is it tied?
Yeah, we are tied. 6, and 4.
Oh,
Nope. 16
6,
points.
6, and 4 is not 18, I believe.
Nope.
That is
I went to film
16,
school,
if I'm not
math
mistaken.
school, okay.
So
16. So Fargo looks to be the one to beat with 18. So Boruff, what have you got for Breaking Away?
I went ahead and gave Breaking Away a 3 because I liked it okay when I watched it again.
I gave it a 1, mainly out of math, but I just thought the other two movies were just that much better.
Yeah, I gave it a 2. I gave the other two an equal score. I think they're both pretty much masterpieces, and Breaking Away is fine. But I gotta go with the other two.
Right, yeah, and that's why I kind of gave Fargo a little bit of the edge, just because obviously if you saw the episode, I'm nothing but a fanboy, so had to be true to myself, I guess.
Damn,
so,
I should have given There Will Be Blood and Edge, and then we would have had a tiebreaker situation.
Boruff had to be in the hot seat. Okay.
I picked Fargo because he gave it more points.
That's right.
So and that makes sense. You know what? Here's the great thing about this. Fargo won. Fargo was the only one of the three we all agreed should have won Best Picture. 2, once again, the Coens beat Paul Thomas Anderson. So there you go.
There we
It
go.
happens. It
Alrighty, so I guess the onus is on me once again to pick a theme. I've never done back-to-back. Okay, this is interesting. Okay, so I'm going to do something that's... we've been watching a lot of quality movies around here, and I think it's time to change that. So this question was posed on Twitter, and I kind of tipped my hand on this question. So the theme that we are going to do, gentlemen, we are going to do movies where the soundtrack is better than the movie. And the movie we are watching is Judgment Night with Dennis Leary.
What the fuck?
Soundtrack kicks ass, but the movie not very good. So that's the theme. Movies where the soundtrack is better than the movie.
All right.
Judgment Night. That
Yeah.
one has a mix-em-up, right? It's like they paired people on that. It's a pairing soundtrack.
You bet.
Okay.
Yep. It's right before that Yeah, right before
Before
rock
that was a
rap
thing?
was like a big thing.
Yeah. They tried
bet.
this with
Yeah, so you
they
had
tried
Faith-
this with the movie Spawn as well. It didn't go so well for Spawn.
Yeah,
but I think it went better
not
for
as
Judgment
well.
Night.
Yeah, that because you've got like Sonic Youth, Cypress Hill with Pearl Jam, Faith No More with the Booyah Tribe. It's awesome. Slayer with Ice-T. It's great. It's just great.
Great.
Movie on the other hand, not
So
so much.
This is going to be not the score, the soundtrack specifically.
Yes. Well, I'll take the score. If you think the score is better than the movie, I'll take that too.
Okay.
But yeah, typically I think this will be fun. I know Zach's a fan of musicals, so I'm curious if he picks a musical where he thinks the music is actually better than the movie.
Well, it's a challenge
Probably
because
not,
there's also like the
Musicals are too tight. Like musicals, it's too tied in. Like
Yeah, right.
It's not the same. Yeah.
That's
like
true.
Quentin
That'd be interesting. But,
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, Tarantino. I mean, anyway, hell, Apocalypse Now. I will say this: Apocalypse Now had the superior soundtrack to both Kramer versus Kramer or Breaking
Edgar
Point.
Wright's made a couple movies where I think ultimately the score has held up. Or the
Okay.
soundtrack has held up better than the movie.
All right, so that's what we're doing next time, kids. We'll be watching Judgment Night from the '90s. Oh boy. So yeah, this is gonna be. I felt that we went too top shelf this time. Let's dumb it down a shade. So with that being said, thank you guys for joining us, and this has been a lot of fun.
I had an idea. Okay.
Okay. Tune in for Zach's great idea. So yeah, tune in next time where we're gonna watch Judgment Night, and if you want homework, listen to that soundtrack because the soundtrack rules. So with that in mind, thank you all for joining us. Find us everywhere: YouTube, Stitcher, wherever we are. Please like, subscribe, share, tell your friends. We're nice people. You can go ahead and talk to us if you think that we are way off base about any of our second chance movies. Feel free to let us know. With that being said, I have been Russell Carlson, and I have been joined by Chris Boruff.
My real name's Dave Stoller. I'm not Italian.
I've also been joined by Zach Powers.
I haven't seen an Italian in 15 months.
Alrighty, and as we always say here on the Movie Trap, Diane Ladd is too young to play Chevy Chase's mom. Thanks for watching.
It's a movie trap promise, yeah.
Raymond.
You know them college boys ain't so smart? I sold one of my worst cars to one of them today. They ain't too smart. I think it's a good thing that Dave never... What is this?
It's, sauteed zucchini.
It's ID food. I don't want no ID food.
It's not. I got it at the A&P. It's like, squash.
I know ID food when I hear it. It's all them eeny foods. Zucchini and linguine and fettuccine. I want some American food, damn it. I want French fries.